What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? So, with the recent announcement of Soulcalibur 6, I figured now would be a good enough time as any to go ahead and drop this little Christmas gift for you guys. So, a little introduction for myself. My name is Bob. I've been playing Soulcalibur for about 10 years now. I didn't start with 2, I actually started with 3. Then I made my way up to 4, and 5, and then I made my way to 2, and yeah, I have a little bit of legacy knowledge with the series. So, I figured with Soulcalibur 6 coming out, now would be good enough time as any to go ahead and make a beginner's guide for Soulcalibur as a whole. Now, we're not going to be looking at intricate mechanics like 4's armor break system or 5's meter gauges. No, this is strictly the bare basics. What is Soulcalibur? So Soulcalibur, in a nutshell, is a 3D movement-based, weapon-based fighting game. Now, when I say weapon-based, every single character in this series uses weapons to some extent. Like, Nightmare here uses a greatsword. Mitsurugi on the right there has a katana. The closest you're going to get to a bare knuckles fighter is Heihachi in the PS2 copy of Soulcalibur 2, and that's about it. For the most part, everyone here uses a weapon, no bare fist or anything like that. So, what really makes Soulcalibur stand out is it's very movement based, and it doesn't really put philosophy on doing big combos as it does stacking up damage from good plays, utilizing movement, strategy, and knowing your character. So, like, if I were to have, if I have Mitsurugi not guard here, just go ahead and be normal. If I were to do that, if I were to try a juggle of some kind with Nightmare, it would look something like this. Yeah, it wouldn't go too well. The reason being is because Soulcalibur has this feature called air control, where if you get launched by your opponent and they're trying to hit you, you can actually control your way out of the situation. I'm pretty sure there's an option for that somewhere in here, isn't there? No, I did not believe so. Well, but either way, if after like one hit in the air, you can start to move around, and that would kind of ruin the juggle. So instead, what gives you big damage in this game is solid plays off of counter hits, smaller combos, and bigger hits. So like, if I were to do this really easy bread and butter combo with Nightmare, that's about a fifth, a quarter of his health bar. Nothing too big, but what you really want to fish for is something like a punish off a long range move, like just keeping space and just tagging him when you can. That's really the big thing about Soulcalibur in a nutshell. It really teaches you to be efficient with your movement. So anyway, a little bit more about the basics of this. What really separates Soulcalibur from a lot of other fighting games is that the movement is among the easiest to grasp, but it's also the most crucial. Soulcalibur was actually the very first fighting game to innovate this idea called 8-way movement. You probably know the website 8-Way Run. It was actually named after this concept. Before this, there were 3D fighting games that had forward walking, back walking, walking into the background, and walking into the foreground. However, Soulcalibur, when it launched on the Dreamcast/PS1, the original Soul Edge, had this idea of being able to walk diagonal back, diagonal forward, so like you can see me creating distance, down backwards, and down forwards. That's what really separates Soulcalibur from a lot of other fighting games. Its sheer fluidity of movement is among the easiest to pick up. Games like Tekken require a lot of practice to be really familiar with wave dashing or backdashing, backdash canceling, etc. As a Tekken veteran, I can tell you that Soulcalibur is a lot easier to grasp in terms of movement, but it's not as fluid, but it's still pretty damn good. Alright, so another cool trait about Soulcalibur is that, assuming that you have not touched this game before at all, and this is your first time even looking at Soulcalibur, the attack buttons represent laterality instead of strength. What I mean by that is, well, they represent laterality and speed. So, for example, in a normal fighting game, you probably have a light punch, a heavy punch, light kick, heavy kick, something like that. In Soulcalibur, you have 3 main attack buttons. A, your horizontal attack. B, your vertical attack. And K, your kick attack. Case in point. The reason being is because this works into the whole of movement-based gameplay. The basic meta of Soulcalibur is choosing to be crouching guards or sidesteps. What I mean by this is your vertical attacks off of A will more often not catch a sidestepping opponent, whereas your vertical attacks are frequently mids and will beat a crouching opponent. So yeah, that's generally where the meta comes from. Conversely, Side step or horizontal attacks can be crouched. Let me set up Mitsurugi to do so. Crouching guard. They're basically your highs from Tekken. Meanwhile, vertical attacks will catch them. Interesting noise. Conversely, if he were to do an 8-way run, my vertical attacks whiff completely. Some will hit, but for the most part, they are not going to connect to your opponent. Another big thing about Soulcalibur is that damage comes from game knowledge, not necessarily combos themselves. Like I said before, you want to pick your spots and be able to land bigger hits, so that way you can score free hits, and you can go into better damage and bigger scenarios that you work in your favor. Each character in this game has less attacks overall than Tekken. Like Nightmare here, I would wager probably has like 50 to 70 attacks. Meanwhile, a Tekken character probably has around 100 plus on average. So that means that there's less moves to intricately learn. However, each move also has a lot more scenarios it's useful for, or each string has more variance to it. Like Nightmare here has an AA. However, if you press A, two extensions you have off this is pressing A and holding it, so you can go to your side stance, or you can press A then press down AA, so you go into low sweeps. Similar situations is off of his B attack, you can go into crouch, down forward B as shown before to go into a combo, etc, etc. There's a lower number of moves on average, but each one generally packs at least a few variants and more ways you can utilize it. And of course, all this movement is backed still, of course, by 8-way running, and that you're able to freely dictate how you want to go about the match. Running forward and running backwards is never really a big issue with this game. A big thing about Soulcalibur also is that it's not like Street Fighter or Tekken where you have a neutral guard. It's like Virtua Fighter where you have a guard button. This is one of the reasons why you probably want to prefer to play Soulcalibur on a pad instead of a fight stick, so that way you have easy access to your guard button. And a unique thing to Soulcalibur 2 I realized is that you can slowly walk forward and backwards with this. Not very important, but still pretty cool. So overall, Soulcalibur 2, 3, and most of 4 are pretty straightforward games. Soulcalibur 5 does introduce meter, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't affect that much outside of being able to do some EX attacks and a really useless critical edge. Aside from that, it's a very straightforward fundamental game. There's no meter gain, there's no guard breaks or anything, so you and your opponent are always on an even playing field, so you don't have to worry about meter management or resource management. It's just you and your opponent dueling. So that's one of the really beautiful things of Soulcalibur, in my opinion. Now, some of the basics of Soulcalibur's actual gameplay. The heads-up display is a lot like Tekken's. You have health gauges, you have a time limit up in the middle there, and you have round counts right below your health gauges. Nothing really too crazy, but it's good to keep in mind all this regardless. So the basic goal of Soulcalibur is to reduce your opponent's hit points to 0 via the use of combos, juggles, well-timed strikes, and good play. It's very much like any other fighting game you may have seen before, but there are other ways in order to score wins, such as ringouts. And of course, the last one is, of course, timeouts. Timeouts are pretty frequent in fighting games in general, but you'll find that it affects Soulcalibur more than a few other games because you have such a solid guard that you don't take chip damage, and it's very hard to crack your guard. You'll find that timeouts tend to get you more rounds than you initially believe. Alright, so on average, your offensive options are, of course, horizontal swings, vertical swing, fast kick attacks to throw your opponent off guard and score counter hits, and any various combinations of those three. Like that, throws, of course, and etc, etc. Also your low attacks. So that's generally how you're going to be cashing out your damage and how you're going to be working offense in this game. Now, of course, as said before, your opponent can dodge vertical attacks by sidestepping to the sides, and they can dodge horizontal attacks by ducking. So that's their general methods of avoiding your attacks. So yeah, the basic meta of this game is getting a read on what your opponent would do in a given situation and maximizing it. Like, if you've been throwing out a lot of horizontal attacks, you're probably going to expect your opponent to start ducking. So you're going to throw it in mid every once in a while to catch him off guard, as well as putting him at different distances in order to get different effects on him, you know, etc, etc. Combos, as I say a couple times already, aren't the main focus, but a few strong hits will definitely win you a round. So like, while I could go, let me pull him away from the wall here. Oops. So again, you can try to go for a juggle and usually fail at unless you're at a wall, but you generally want to just go for stronger hits, get better scenarios, and start going for more mix-ups. That's generally the best way of scoring offense in this game, and will bring you to victory that much quicker. Throws and lows are generally exactly how they are in Tekken. There are a few key differences. Lows in Soulcalibur are generally less effective in this game because if they cause a knockdown, they tend to be reactable, and faster lows, they generally are just for poking. There's no real in-between middle ground, with a few exceptions. Another big difference from Tekken to Soulcalibur is how throws work. In Tekken, every throw in the game has different animations depending on what throw is put out. Like a left throw will have their left arm stick out. If it's a right throw, their right arm will stick out. In Soulcalibur, no such difference exists. This is your A throw, this is your B throw. Both of them look exactly the same. So in this game, it's more, if you want to break throws, you have a slightly bigger window of opportunity than usual. However, you really have to guess, and you want to know what the opponent's looking for and what kind of situation you're in. Like with Nightmare here, if I were to do a B throw at the wall, it'll just bring Mitsurugi away from it. But if I were to do an A throw, it will keep it in the corner. So there's probably more chance on average that your opponent's going to want to go for that, or he's going to go for this crouching low or crouching throw that will keep him at the wall as well. So on average, your defensive options are guarding, crouch block, back walk, side walk, and guard impact. Guard impact will be gotten more into later, but I just want to focus on your normal defensive options right now. So as explained before, there is no risk of guard breaking except against a few slow unblockables. One example being this. You can also have a guard crash, where if your opponent guards it, it will stagger them and put you a lot of plus frames, but it won't really do any damage. So like if I were to set Mitsurugi to guard this, yeah, again, it doesn't really do anything. Also, the fact that it's slow on the slower side means they can probably guard impact it, but again, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So again, there's no real risk of blocking lows for an excessive amount of time. There's no guard meter, there's no chip damage. You just have to be careful of the slow unblockables and you're pretty much fine. Which even then, they're easy to see and on average counter hit, except for a few scenarios. A strong defense in this game is generally keeping a few steps away from your opponent, waiting for him to throw something out, having them miss, and then having the reflexes to get either fast move in or have a whip something big and you go for bigger damage. Alright, so Ringouts are, as mentioned before, will score your rounds, and Ringouts are also a fairly unique mechanic to Soulcalibur as a 3D fighter, because Ringouts generally don't exist in these kinds of fighting games. However, they do shape a good amount of the meta here because there are very few stages that don't have drop-off points. So as a result, you're going to want to know your stage intrinsically before you walk in, so you avoid a lot of these scenarios. The idea of Ringouts are pretty simple. If your opponent falls out of them, then you win the round. Not the whole set, but just the round itself. Usually when you're the aggressor, you have the upper hand, because you have at least a few forward-facing options that will knock the opponent out of the ring. And there's also a handful of throws that will knock him out of the ring as well. So you can usually hit him with a mid that will knock him out. You can hit him with horizontal that has a chance of knocking him out. Some faster moves on counter will knock him out. And throws sometimes have the opportunity to do as well. So the aggressor on average really has the upper hand when it comes to this scenario. If you're a defender like Mitsurugi, you really have to know the matchup so you don't get caught in a variety of scenarios that will get you wrung out. I.e., Nightmare here has a low throw that, if not blocked, is just going to knock him out of the ring. This isn't a throw that, I'm pretty sure it can be broken, but it can be blocked if you block low. So it's not a true throw, but it's more of a command grab that can have it just be happen to be blocked. However, you cannot react to this on when it comes out, so you just want to know he's going to be doing it. Okay, so the last thing I want to go over for this basic guide for Soulcalibur is guard impact. This is definitely a thing that you'll be seeing a lot more as you delve more into the advanced metagame for Soulcalibur, so it's better to get this out of the way now to know it exists. So Soulcalibur has this unique parry mechanic called guard impact, where if you press forward guard at the same time, you will do this animation that will catch incoming high and mid attacks and you can repel them, and you can set up for your own free attack. If you land the guard impact, you get a free hit unless your opponent times their own guard impact reversal. So a guard impact generally will look like this, where your opponent lunges forward and they can score a free hit if you aren't blocking. So if I were to set up Mitsurugi to counterattack after he gets scored a guard impact, I'm holding guard while I'm doing it, and I am unable to guard him in time. So he gets a free hit, and he manages to shut down my offense, and he gives himself a pretty decent advantage. Now, pretty much everything in this game can be parried, with the one exception being the slow, unblockable fire moves as mentioned before. So he's unable to parry those. However, a unique thing to Soulcalibur 2 is that you can have throws parried. I don't know if this is unique to Soulcalibur 2. I've never seen any other Soulcalibur game. So if someone can notify me, that would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, you can basically have anything in this game parried. Horizontal attacks, mid attacks, doesn't matter speed, kick attacks can be parried as well. Low attacks can be parried as well. Inputting down forward for the guard impact will allow you to parry these lows as mentioned. So definitely good to keep that in mind. Guard impact itself is actually very powerful, and however, a missed input on the guard impact will leave you pretty open if you're not careful. So if I were to get into a trade war of boost guard impacts with Mitsu, if I mistime an input, then yeah, I'm going to be I'm going to be open to retaliation pretty quickly. So guard impact wars in Soulcalibur are pretty common, but mixing up the speed of your reposts when you parry an attack will generally allow you to come out on top in these kind of scenarios. Like if we're scrapping, if I were to do this and he's expecting the guard impact, then I can probably tag it with something like that, but don't expect it. That's just an extreme scenario. Something that would be a little more practical is if he's expecting a kick and he times it so it's faster, but instead this comes out. That would be a little more practical because he's open after the guard impact animation. So yeah, hope you guys have found this guide useful. There might be more parts in the future as things develop for Soulcalibur 6, and hope you guys learned a few things. See ya!